and evening to the colleagues.
Yes, Iman, we are ready now.
Thank you, Dr. Saha. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is our second episode of the Global Research Forum on Diaspora and Transnationalism expert series. It's an armchair discussion with experts on specific topics. My name is Iman Ahmed. I am a GRFDT non-resident fellow, and I am pleased to be hosting this episode today with you. We are anticipating to have a rich discussion. We are still on the subject of the war in Sudan, and today we are focusing on the impact of the war in Sudan on children and young people. Our guest today is Dr. Sara Ibrahim Abdegalil. Sara is a Sudanese British national and a consultant pediatrician. Welcome, Sara.
Welcome, Iman. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for being with us today. I would like to give a little biography about Sara. Sara is a consultant pediatrician and a graduate of the University of Khartoum, Sudan, who trained in the United Kingdom. And she currently works as a senior clinician for the National Health Services in the UK. She obtained her fellowship in pediatrics and child health from the Royal College of Pediatrics and Child Health in the UK. She as well completed a master's degree in tropical pediatrics and child health at Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine with a distinction and prize. Sara's interests range from service development, in particular quality, safety, and safeguarding with regards to children. During Sara's training, she worked with refugees also, and children in the UK with street children in Brazil. And she also engaged in conducting training on female genital mutilation in the UK and in Sudan as well, and training on safeguarding the rights of the child in both countries as part of her volunteer engagements. We also know Sara as the former president of the Sudan Doctors Union in the United Kingdom. And that was coinciding with a historical time in Sudan, which was the revolution of 2019. So she led the UK branch, which provided great support along with other Sudanese diaspora organizations and medical organizations, supported the revolution in Sudan. Currently, Sara works with Shabaka Social Enterprise as a consultant in the diaspora engagement, and she's the focal point for Sudan. So we're looking forward to an engaging discussion with you, Sara, and welcome again. We're very pleased to have you.
Well, I am pleased to be invited to this forum, and much actually more pleased that Iman Ahmed is the host. So I'm looking forward for this discussion.
Thank you. I should mention that I have known Sara for many years, and we are also companions in our diaspora Sudanese doctors organizations. And we have been involved in also diaspora engagement overall beyond the medical entities. Thanks again, Sara. So let's start our discussion with you about the situation or the overall internally displaced situation in Sudan. Tell us about Khartoum city. What is the status even before the war? So that we engage our audiences. Thank you.
Thank you. So Sudan has been unfortunate for a few decades under dictatorship with lack of governance that led to poor infrastructure and ongoing conflicts in different zones, but mainly the Western region. So the conflict and the poor infrastructure outside Khartoum led to significant internal displacement of Sudanese. However, we have to remember as well that Sudan has been welcoming refugees from outside Sudan. So we can see that in Khartoum, which is the capital, there is about 10 to 11 million. This is the last sort of population count in Khartoum. That's equivalent to 25% of the total population in Sudan, which is about 40 million.
Thank you, Sara. That gives us an idea of the situation of both refugees and internal displacement in Sudan. And what was the nature of livelihoods and social development situation for those internally displaced populations? Thank you.
So, as you said, Iman, in 2018, 2019, the historical revolution in Sudan, that's still ongoing, despite all of the crises that Sudanese people have and still are facing. The main call was for social justice, because there is ongoing poor, I would say, governance that led that the Sudanese people, but mainly those who are vulnerable and disadvantaged, were not receiving the basic sort of rights. So that is safe shelter, housing, health, education, nutrition, and therefore one of the main sort of call for the revolution was to establish social justice and build these services. So this was not achieved, sadly. And now, as we are facing the armed conflict, that is even further worsened by the direct destruction by the war or the intentional destruction of some of the basic infrastructure in Khartoum and in Western Sudan.
This is really sad. Thank you very much, Sara. So you're talking about a population that has originally been displaced. What impact in terms of displacement and population movement has the war had on these people already living in the outskirts of major cities and urban centers, Khartoum city as well? Tell us more about the impact of the war. Thank you.
So people now, when they talk about Sudan, they talk about those who were able to leave Khartoum or were able to leave the conflict zone. And this is the minority. The majority are still in the conflict zone, trapped, facing either the bombing or the bullets, no safe water supply, no access to food, potential starvation and malnutrition, attacks, a lack of security, and as well several reports about sexual violence. So at the moment, those who were able to leave Khartoum because they can physically, or they have the means and the money to do, managed either to move internally in Khartoum or to leave Sudan. However, the majority remains trapped, and that will include street children, orphanages, and as well the elderly who cannot move, or those with disability and special needs. The major concern that we all have is that those who are in Khartoum and conflict zone, they don't have access to food. to health services, to medication. One of the examples that we have been all working with Iman, yourself, myself, and others, is try to network and connect patients with others who have insulin supply, who have medication within a very complicated situation and lack of safe corridors.
Thank you, Sarah. You have shed light on various aspects of the impact of this conflict on people in general, and also gave a little focus on children. Tell me a little bit about the issue of family separation. You also mentioned that in a previous discussion. I would like you to highlight this matter of separation of children from their parents, caregivers, and overall lack of maintaining the unity of families during this time. Thank you. Over to you.
So when the conflict erupted, there was like, and still there are no safe corridors, and as well there are other factors that will determine who will leave and who will stay inside Khartoum or the other areas of conflict. So one of the factors will be finance. Some people don't have the money, and even if they do have the money, the bank system has failed completely, so they don't have cash. The diaspora have been collecting donation, but there is no way to transfer that. It's very complicated. And so people had to make a decision about who will leave and who will stay. The mother with their children, the father with the adolescents. The other way around, the girls should leave because of the fear of sexual violence. The boys should hide because of the fear of abduction. And therefore, people had to separate and have to divide themselves to see what are the risk and benefit. And then after they left Khartoum, at the borders, particularly at the northern border, we can say the young people above the age of 16, they will have to wait for weeks now to get their visa entry into Khartoum. So there are a lot of families where mothers and children under the age of 16, had to move, and while their adolescent and young sort of boys, in particular, had to stay behind them in a situation which is not safe, and there is no infrastructure for shelter, for water, for food, for health. People are talking about fire erupting and about scorpion. So there are a lot of risk on the route to try to save your life from Khartoum and from the conflict, but you face other dangerous situations.
That is really a complex situation indeed. Not only the hardships of the journey, the decisions that had to be made about how to separate the family. Family separation seems to be something forced on these families, family units, and on the overall society because of the hardships of the journeys, the security situation, and the financial hardships and the lack of our diaspora communities lacking the ability to transfer funds because of the collapse of the banking system. And that brings me to the point of how much our diaspora has been shouldering in terms of remittances, and how much remittances also are contributing to, more recently, basic life needs in Sudan. I would like you to tell us a little bit about, you are a pediatrician. Tell us about the population of Sudan. You know more about the issues of children and young adults. So, what's the percentage of young persons in Sudan? Thank you.
Thank you, Iman. So the Sudanese nation is a very young nation, with about 49% are 18 years and younger. And if we look at Khartoum and we say there are 11 million or 10 million, we have to imagine that almost half of that are children and young people. The same would apply in other areas and regions. And sadly, as I said, before the revolution and during that, we are all aware about the high neonatal mortality rate, the high infant mortality rate, the high maternal mortality rate. And the hope was to establish health services that will reduce this significant mortality rate. But as the UNICEF last year actually was highlighting the risk of malnutrition that is evolving. That's before the conflict and before the war, and the issues about food security in Sudan. We have to remember, for those who are listening, that the democratic transition was erupted in October 2021 by a military coup, and that obviously have contributed further to the pathway for establishing a civic state where basic services would have been established or looked at. So it is a very complex situation that now ended as well with the conflict. I just wanted to mention briefly about the remittances. In Sudan now, it is becoming the norm, sadly, that the majority of the families are, despite working or being civil servant or self-employed, the majority have to depend on relatives from abroad. Maybe earlier, before 20 or 30 years, it was getting the money to establish a long-term pension or to support families with family houses and residence. But at present, it is mainly to support with basic needs, daily needs for getting food, for paying for your medicine, for paying for schools. And therefore, to have this significant banking interruption and collapse during the conflict, it means that there is a significant number of families who will not have the resources to feed themselves or to get their medications, even if there are safe corridors. And that will be applied to the internally displaced Sudanese who moved from Khartoum or from Western Sudan to an area which is, I would say, relatively safe. It is relatively safe from the bullets, but they are facing other challenges that can include the sort of the basic needs every day. As well as we have discussed before, there are certain categories that may be not that visible. Those are, for example, the orphanage in El Maigoma. It is one of the major orphanages in Khartoum, and the area is in the middle of the conflict zone. The resident has been bombed. They don't have electricity. The supply for their milk and food is very scarce. The doctors cannot reach to them. The nurses can't. Those who are like the supporters who are staying, which we are grateful for them for staying there despite all of that. Not all of them can reach. And at the moment, this group of children cannot be moved to a safe place because there is no safe corridor. So they are basically stuck, despite all efforts, in this very, I would say, serious, distressing situation for all of us pediatricians.
There is definitely a sad situation, populations being trapped, children who are previously in a vulnerable situation, orphans, street children, and the difficulties faced by the population overall and by some special categories of children. Limitations of food, family finance, limited access to health, education, definitely disrupted, as you mentioned. Tell us about these seem to be the somewhat indirect forms of impact on these children. What are the more direct impact on children, please? Thank you.
So the direct impact, definitely, that these children are themselves, they have faced the violence. So they could have been killed or they have witnessed serious sort of incidents and casualties, and they have been injured. And we have seen some of the children, even in hospitals, they were injured when the hospitals were bombed. So there is the physical aspect, and there is the psychological and mental aspect of losing their parents, their carers, or their family members in a very brutal way. The other major issue is actually exploitation of these children, and especially, as we have mentioned, there is significant financial needs. There is the concern as well about abduction and about recruitment in the militias. And people are very concerned, particularly about young boys and young men. The reports are increasing about sexual violence as a tool of war against women and girls. And there is documentation and monitoring in Western Sudan and in Khartoum. Because of the issues with digital access, with the internet connectivity, we don't have all of the information. But what is being shared so far is very concerning, that children are facing all different aspects of child abuse with lack of protection. And there is other elements, I think, of human rights, I would say violation at this aspect, which the malnutrition, and there has been damage to the vaccination program. There is issues with the antenatal program. So children or babies are born on the move and are born to be and moving along from conflict zone to other areas, which will subject them to different issues, or the health-wise or security-wise.
Thank you very much. That just confirms the theme of our series, which is population on the move. And there seems to be multiple movements within the cities of Sudan. For those who left Khartoum, the capital, and we know that the pattern of development in Sudan is very much concentrated in big cities and more so in the capital, Khartoum. For those who left to other cities around the country who needed some specialized treatment, do you think they would have the same level of access as before, or that will create another level and a layer of hardship due to lack of these services?
So we are, as Sudanese, health workers, whether working inside Sudan or outside Sudan, we have all worked together, myself, Iman, and others, regarding the issue of decentralization, because unfortunately, most of the health services is mainly in Khartoum. And people were hoping that there will be efforts to decentralize that. So actually what's happening in Khartoum is not only affecting the people in Khartoum, it's even affecting those who live in other states when we come to the issue about mainly health. And moving to other states with, I would say, the infrastructure is, as we said, is very fragile. So there are certain services like the renal dialysis units. People are trying to establish that. The intensive care, I know that in Wad Medani, they are trying to establish the pediatric intensive care unit. So the local community is working, but with poor resources and the current situation, this definitely will be limited. And there is an issue with the availability of life-saving medication anyway in Sudan. And therefore, what is left there as a storage has to be, there has to be some sort of assistance very, very quickly so that people can maintain lives. Maybe, there are certain services that are still people delivering, like obstetrics and gynecology, but even pregnant women were shot and were killed within the conflict on their movement to go and deliver their babies. And therefore, at all different levels, the health services has been affected. I just want to say, while we are here, that we are really sending all of our support and solidarity to our colleagues who are working in this conflict zone and staying there despite all of these challenges. And therefore, as a diaspora health worker, I feel that my role is to advocate and support them as much as we can.
Definitely, the role of Sudanese doctors around the country has been immense since the onset of this conflict. They have shown leadership. They are risking their lives. We are aware that 19 doctors, medical students, various categories of health workers, dentists, laboratory technicians, pharmacists, you name it, have unfortunately lost their lives in this conflict, either as a result of the bombing and aerial attacks, or being targeted and shot at directly. So our condolences to all the families and to the Sudanese community overall. Sara, I would like to focus on category 3 of children that you mentioned, which is street children. Tell me more about this phenomenon in Sudan. Thank you.
So sadly, in Sudan, we have one of the largest number of street children, and the causes are multiple, whether it was from the conflict, because in Sudan, we have been going through long periods of dictatorship following military coup, armed conflict, and this have affected the country deep inside, and the sort of the social matrix and the financial as well aspect. And so we have a significant number of street children who are working to support their families, who have left education, who are subjected to different types of abuse. And during the revolution, as we were discussing, Imam, before, in the sit-in, which was the new Sudan, the multicultural Sudan that we were all dreaming about, the street children actually were looked after. They found the care, the school, the food, their voice, their contribution. But then the Khartoum massacre took place, and we don't know where they are. So always, during this conflict, this group of vulnerable children and young people will be subjected to significant violence, but they will go missing. And nobody will be able to count for them, and nobody will know even to achieve the justice and accountability for what happened to them. And this is now the worry, because some of them don't have the shelter. Some of them may have been in the middle of Khartoum to try to do any type of daily sort of casual work, and they could have been killed, abducted, abused, and nobody have reported them. We have a lot of reports about missing people, but most of them are adult or young youth in the neighborhood committee, but nobody have been reporting about street children, and nobody knows what's happening for them. And from my work that I've done before in Brazil, and I did this because I wanted to learn about street children in another context, behind each child or each boy who's in the streets or on the street, because it makes a difference, there will be a significant number of siblings who are suffering, and you can imagine what they will be going through at the moment.
Thank you, Sara. That's another sad reality of the inequitable development, continuing conflicts in Sudan, and which have precipitated lots of poverty and movement, rural to urban movements, and some of these children were either abandoned or lost their parents and caregivers in the war outside Khartoum, and came for safe haven. I just would like to give some background. The massive sit-in Sara is talking about is a point in the revolution history of Sudan. In 2019, people marched from all cities to the capital Khartoum, and there was a massive sit-in that continued for over 3 weeks and months in protest. It was the people's way of peacefully expressing their resentment of the military government that ruled Sudan for 30 years. So this was a huge multi-million sit-in at the capital of Khartoum in front of the military headquarters. Very peaceful and interestingly, very well organized. People were cleaning up, cooking and bringing food. And the slogan at that time was, if you have something, contribute. If you don't, just come and take, feel free to take. So it was like a pot, a melting pot for everybody to contribute. It was just the embodiment of the give and take culture of Sudan. And I think this at the moment is what's carrying people through these difficult times when even international aid is jeopardized and cannot enter into the country. So thank you for that. And during that time, as Sara mentioned, people set up makeshift schools for these street children, education, health. They felt they belonged. So now this is an added layer of vulnerability that's going unnoticed, unfortunately, as you said, Sara. It's a very sad reality. So tell us about the kinds of questions children are asking. Everyone in Sudan and in the diaspora, and even those who made it to other countries, are talking about the impact on children. Some are not even comprehending. Their kids have some have lost their voices, some have lost their ability to talk, some have lost their ability to move, and we all know that some of these could be psychosomatic manifestations. Tell us more about these questions and your concerns around these matters. Thank you.
So the trauma is huge. The trauma is huge, and it varies. It varies from facing the soldiers, the militia, seeing dead bodies on the street, the risk of the attacks, the panic of the parents, that will be as well transmitted to the children. The journey, and there is the shooting. One of my friends was telling me with her husband in the car, their journey for 4 hours from one sort of house to the other house at the other side of the city, and how they were hiding behind under the seat, and how they trying to reach the bus that will take them outside Khartoum. The children, obviously, that would need a huge input and assessment, and there has been a lot of initiatives from inside Sudan and from the diaspora that I'm aware of. But there are some questions about, are we going to go back to Khartoum? Is Khartoum now completely empty? Is everybody being killed? So definitely we will see that coming in their children's stories, in their writings. There are some who are not sleeping well. There's a lot of sort of symptoms that shows the anxiety and the panic. And they have moved either, those who are lucky were able to move to the countryside with their own relatives, but this is not the majority. So at least they are in a safer place, and yeah, people can work with that. But there are others who have moved to areas where it's challenging and increase the vulnerability as well. And there is interruption of education. There is no access to social support. I know there's one initiative in Al Jazeera in Madani, and there's some work virtually, but that will not, cover the extent of the trauma that these children and young people have faced, and the worry that they're still going to face at the moment. The problem, Iman, is it's very gloomy. All of the ceasefire agreement have failed. No safe corridor to enter and see who's still trapped there and who needs help. There are some who will need physical help because physical, special needs. There are other who we need hearing aid. There, it is. We still don't know the extent of the damage and where are those children and young people and how their family can afford. I think at the moment, their family main reason or for going out is to make sure that they are alive. But after that, the psychosocial support or the health support is at the moment, sadly, is not the priority because people just want to survive the bullets and the bombing and the attacks in the conflict zone.
Thank you very much, Sarah. You've again emphasized the importance of paying attention to special categories of the population, people with special needs, children with special needs. You also told us about the extent of psychosocial impact that cannot really be fathomed at this moment. And I think it would take the country and the international community a long time in order to uncover the impacts of this war. So finally, to wrap up our very interesting and very painful at the same time discussion, what do you see the role of the diaspora in supporting? You already mentioned advocacy. You mentioned that you are raising funds, but there's difficulty even in transferring these funds. What else has the Sudanese doctors and communities in the diaspora been doing? I see some of your organizations trying to operate hospitals in Sudan or support with multiple initiatives. Tell us more, please. Thank you.
As you have said, Iman, the main response is now from the communities inside Sudan and outside Sudan, from the Sudanese communities inside Sudan, as the emergency response room, and the Sudanese diaspora. And the Sudanese diaspora have been very responsive. And this is something that we feel it's our duty, and we are obliged to do it. And this is the minimum we can do. There are I wouldn't say traditional, but the common things that we usually do about raising funds and donation. That has been, done in different parts of the world, I would say. There is as well advocacy and media cover to make sure that the issue, what's happening in Sudan, is heard. The voices are, always present. The truth, the misinformation should not spread, and only facts should be, presented. But experts in different fields have been supporting, especially doctors, in different ways, with those who are working locally, and whether trying to help those inside the conflict virtually or at the borders. There have been different campaigns about telemedicine. Just yesterday, I had a message from a lady who just gave birth and asking me about her newborn. I answered what I could, but then I referred her to a neonatologist. So there is a list, and that's not only in pediatrics, but in different aspects. And the main concern what we have now in the diaspora is to make sure that the international community will deliver the humanitarian assistance to the right people, to those who are in need, and to localize their response. As I said, since October 2021, we don't have a government. We lost our government, and that makes things complex. And that is very important that they work with the right group that are serving those in need. From Shabaka, because we feel like there's a lot of work that's been going, brilliant work. As you said, it's very painful for us even to sit and discuss that, because we feel like there's a lot of things to be done. So what we are hoping to help with is coordinating these efforts, connecting people, networking, so that people work together, because the situation requires unity. This is one of, this is the worst that we have faced. We have faced before conflict crimes against humanity and genocide, but this now is extending in Sudan. And therefore, we're trying from Shabaka by the Humanitarian Coordination Unit to help us, in the diaspora, make sure that people talking to each other, connecting and working together to have an efficient diaspora engagement and impact.
Thank you very much. I think your message about the international community localizing, delivering aid to those who are in need and trapped inside Sudan. I see a response rallying in the countries surrounding Sudan, but it's very important to bring that support to those who could not leave, the real disadvantaged population under this war. So we trust that the international community is working closely, but more is definitely needed in order to achieve that. Thank you, Sarah. And I would like to open the floor for questions. And I think we have a couple questions in the chat. There is a comment from Paddy. Paddy, would you like to share your comment and tell us more about your concern on the remittance aspect, please? Okay, we'll give a chance to Paddy later. We have Ahmed, Murtala, Hassan. Ahmed, would you like to come on and ask your question, please? Ahmed Murtala. So while we wait for Ahmed and Paddy, any questions for Sarah, please? You are welcome. Colleagues online and our guests, feel free, please. Professor Raj, please.
Unmute. Okay, thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing this very painful situation in Sudan. It's very sad because it only takes the country backward whenever there's conflict. And now you have a situation which is leading to this breakdown of law and order. Now, anything in that confusion and breakdown of law and order can happen. So, we are grateful for you to have shared this. But my question is, with conflict, we know the challenges. There may be very particular challenges in the case of each country. But generally, we know what happens, the challenges. The question I have is, what sort of impact would this situation, conflict, have on the social cohesion of society, trust? In other words, the trust is also very badly affected, and trust and confidence in your surroundings and your situation is the cornerstone of development. In other words, if you lose trust with another person or with your community, it can be very, very damaging, for even long-term damaging, for long-term development and so on. Although it's in a way related to migration, because people are also moving into communities you don't know. Communities may not be trusting you because they don't know if you're on that side or on the other side of the fence. So what does it do to the community trust and in the long run, the development of a country? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Over to you, Sarah. And perhaps you could also tell us about how people were received in the other cities of Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Definitely, with the if we look first of Sudan, I would like to speak about that in circles. So if we look at the internal displacement, and obviously we are about now 6 weeks plus, there has been significant displacement internally for families going back to their rural cities and rural towns and villages, where they have left it to move to urban areas seeking employment, finance, and health. So they are back there where it is safe, but there are very scarce resources, and that will put pressure. At the moment, there is this support, there is this social support, mainly family, extended family support. But this will not continue, for a long time. This is where we were talking about building field hospitals, about the change about the agricultural schemes in these areas. So from being commercial production to be, trying to get food locally for the population. So you have to change your plan for the most of the farmers. But what is the reward that they can get? How can they expand the primary health services to accommodate all of those who have moved? The poor educational infrastructure. So these areas are going to cause tension, definitely. And this is what we are talking about. The response should be equivalent to the needs. But if we look at the movement at the border and outside Sudan, there is a significant issue about trust. And there is a significant issue about, as well, survival. At the moment, Sudanese people are not considered as refugees in Egypt or in Ethiopia or in Chad. That is, for some people, they would prefer that, but for others, it is going to be a challenge. But if we talk about the trust between the diaspora and the local communities, we are privileged in one way. If there is anything that is, I would say, positive in this disaster, is that we have a well-structured neighborhood committees, and they are for years and years. So they're not just as a group that was formed during the conflict. So we are all supporting the neighborhood committees, that they know their local community, they know the gaps, they know the needs, they are connected. For example, I interviewed one of them. I was so proud. Proud is the word. I was so proud of them. And as I'm living up, away, it's like, how can I help that? So they have created their own co-op, storage of food and distributing that. They have a bicycle. They're trying to distribute medication. They're trying to have a local generator to work the pharmacy and the insulin and the vaccination. They're trying to make sure that there is security, and if there are areas or any sort of suspicious movement, to alert each other. And maybe there's something we haven't mentioned, that there is the role of the social platforms, despite the internet issues and the digital access, that is playing an important role in connecting and protecting as well those who are inside. I think our role in the diaspora to support them and maintain the trust is not to act on their behalf. We need to react to their requests. What they need, we have to support them and augment that, but not make any assumptions. And we have to as well, I always talk about governance and diaspora engagement. There has to be governance when we are engaging, and we have to act within the governance pillars to maintain the trust.
Thank you very much, Sara. That is very informative. And Professor Raj, I hope this addressed your question.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will come in again if there's time. If there's time, I'll come in again. If there's time.
Indeed, that would be a pleasure. Thank you, Professor Raj, again. We have a question from VJ. VJ, do you want to come forward and ask your question, please? VJ Nair.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Please go ahead.
It was really an informative session. We get to know a lot of new things which we are not aware of. It is all about children and the impact. So what is the role of United Nations? Because they are everywhere to provide protection and safety to the people. So what is the role they are playing in this place now?
Sorry, Iman, what is the role of? I missed that part.
What's the role of the United Nations? The question is, of course, we can't speak on behalf of the UN, but we are aware that.
And UNICEF also. And UNICEF also.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. UNICEF is working closely to address the issues of children, issued a statement on this, the matter of expired vaccines, and coordinating services. But there's definitely no safe corridors, and this is a major issue. Sara, please, over to you. Thank you.
So there has been a lot of, I would say, discussions and plans, but this cannot be implemented. They have as well tried to assess the needs, the gaps, and connecting with the main stakeholders and the main players. But as I mentioned, the ceasefire agreement always failed. And therefore, there is a huge risk about security. So the International Red Cross has been as well acting on the ground with the UN, trying, for example, to bury the dead bodies, try to give food for those who are trapped, try to give food to those in the hospitals who are working. So imagine you went to the hospital on the 14th, and you are still in the hospital until now because there is nobody else to come and replace you, and it is not safe for you to leave. They're providing them with food and water supply. The situation is dire, and there is no any commitment by either sides to the Geneva Agreement. The hospitals have been attacked. As I said, it's the hospitals, the central laboratory have been invaded, the Institute of Endemic Diseases, the mosques, the church, the schools, the libraries, the museums. It is as Professor have said, we all know when there is war and where there is conflict. Sadly, we know what is going to happen. And it is to wipe our history and to wipe our present and our future. So the only way is to stop the conflict and to provide safe corridors so that we can save lives.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, Vijay, Kuwait, for your question. I will read a couple of comments in the chat. A comment from Paddy saying trapped populations and remittances is a real concern, and she's wondering how we can raise the importance of alternative pathways in crisis that could be scaled up. And I think this is a very important subject, and I bring it back to GRFDT on maybe for future discussion, not only about the case of Sudan, but the principle of creating alternative pathways in times of conflict when the banking system collapses. So thank you, Paddy, for raising that point. Ahmed Hassan is asking what sort of initiatives are in place to support the educational needs of children trapped by the conflict.
So the educational sort of initiatives that have been done for the internally displaced who are in a safe place. And so they are secure, at least, and then there has been some programs for their training and education. Sadly, those who are trapped, unless they can access some sort of telecommunication so that we know they are safe, at this moment, they are not able to join. But there is a very, very I would say, a very good initiative in Al Jazeera, where there has been significant number about creating a child-friendly spaces, and that is done in support of those who, left Al Khartoum. The diaspora been playing major role, and it's a transnational involvement. So not one group from one area, but from Ireland, from UK, from Qatar, from Saudi Arabia, together with the local sort of teachers and psychologists. And there's some, I think, material online in Facebook. You have to remember that Sudanese communities, they use Facebook significantly. It is like they're now at the moment their space, so that can be used. There are other initiatives north of Khartoum and some initiatives in Western Sudan. But to be honest with you, it all depends on the security status of that, the community and the population.
Thank you, Sara. And I would like to add also the challenge with the communication networks and electricity. So access to internet is not a given in Sudan. And the moment this conflict started, the internet access on these websites that monitor connectivity came down to 2% at a point in time. And I don't think it has climbed back to 100% or any full connectivity. So that's another layer of isolation and being trapped, imposed on the communities. Any further questions from our participants? We are now at the top of the hour. Perhaps I could invite Professor Benoud to give a closure, if Professor Benoud is around.
No, he is not here.
Thank you, Dr. Sahu. Professor Raj, would you like to close our session, please? Over to you.
Let me try. Thank you. Okay. What I can say is that, it's very sad. It's a sad situation. Ethiopian conflict just ended. Okay, so you have the Sudan one. And I'm wondering to what extent all these things, they are bound together. One comes out, the other goes in. How these situations are creating constant and consistent disruption in the region, in the sub-region, in the individual countries. And this is a matter that I think the AU, it's outside our remit, AU needs to debate on, needs to discuss that in and out countries are going into, and then to what extent these are rubbing into each other's. Yeah, I mean, this is a long term. But suffice it to say, I would like to thank you very much on behalf of GRFDT for filling in the information that we don't know, and you're perhaps on the ground or being from Sudan. And so we are privileged to get that insight from you, even though it's very sad and it's very, very painful. And our hearts go to the Sudanese people and those who are involved in supporting them. And that is amazing, that not only are they feeling the pain of what is happening in the country, which is taking the country back, but they still have the courage to provide, to use their innovative ways to support the communities, to support the country. So thank you very much. And Iman, thank you so much for moderating the session. We are privileged to have you, Dr. Sara, to fill this information for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Raj, and thanks to all our participants. Thanks to GRFDT for giving me this opportunity, and thank you very much, Sara, for shedding light on the sad reality of children under the current conflict in Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you very much.